Hey everybody, welcome back to Movies You Missed podcast. This is episode 76. V, how you doing?
I'm doing great and stoked to be talking about comedies again.
Yes, I know. I'm excited as well because we have been trying to do more comedies. For some reason, we don't really go the comedic route, but I'm very glad we did this week, and I think we definitely need to be getting into a better rhythm of adding comedy to our podcast.
I totally agree, John. And I think a lot of the reason is because when someone asks you what movies you recommend, oftentimes you go with movies that are more generalized to an overall audience. And as we've always talked about, comedy is so divisive. And so it's not usually a genre that's right at the top of our heads that we would recommend, which is probably why it's been secondary or I guess tertiary on our list in terms of genres.
I think you're right. I have that problem with just about everybody because you think you know somebody's sense of humor and you recommend like an R-rated comedy and they're like, yeah, you know, we turned that off after 5 minutes. And you're like, oh, okay, well then I'm never going to recommend a comedy to you again. Like what do you want from me?
Exactly. And so thankfully both you and I have discussed it and we're working hard on putting more comedies into your ears.
Indeed.
And really this week is purely because the next month of October, as all of our longtime listeners know, is going to be filled with horror movies. And so upon my insistence, this week had to be a comedy.
It had to be to segue us into a terrifying month of Halloween and horror.
That John is super excited about.
Can't wait. And V, I know you're not looking forward to it, but I can't wait to scare you again.
Yes, I've already talked to my sister, and we are watching several of those horror movies together, so I don't have to watch them by myself.
Yay. Lights will be off and the sound will be cranked.
Yes, they might just be on when I'm sleeping that night.
That's fine. That's totally fine.
But before that happens, like we said, this week is all about comedies.
Hell yeah, and before we get into it, just in case anybody doesn't know who we are, we're Vee and we're John. We are 25-year veterans of the entertainment industry. V was in stunts, I was in production. We also worked together on a couple of projects, and now we're here discussing movies that we love, movies that we feel flew under the radar, movies that need to be revisited. The two movies today absolutely should be revisited, maybe once a month at this point. I don't know. I really am a big fan of both of these movies, especially because, V, I have not seen your movie in over 2 decades and can't wait to get into it. But before we do that, we like to discuss movies that we saw this week, either in theaters or on streaming. V, I believe you and I both stayed home for these movies this week.
We did.
All right. I think I'm just going to go first because we're going to discuss your final watch at the end of this little bit. I ended up watching the Gerard Butler, Mike Colter, Tony Goodwin-led Plane, everybody.
Was it any good?
It was actually pretty fucking badass, I gotta say. It kind of took me by surprise. I heard a lot of decent things about the movie. It's on Starz currently at the moment, and I have Starz because Outlander is on, and my wife loves Outlander. So I decided to check it out. So I decided to check it out, and this movie was a lot of fun. It was bloody, it was intense, it was violent, extremely predictable in every sense of the word, but I had a great time, and I think V, you would actually like it too.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. It's not like super unbelievable, but it's, you know, they crash land on this island that's run by criminals, and of course these guys come and kidnap the passengers, and Gerard Butler's got to save the day. And, you know, if you want a movie that you can just shut your brain off and enjoy some bloody
popcorn
violence, exactly, 100% popcorn movie. There's no need for a sequel, so I really hope they don't do that. I don't know if it was successful enough for a sequel, but definitely an enjoyable movie. If you guys like Gerard Butler at all, give it a shot.
All right, I do. I did really enjoy his action movie Olympus Has Fallen.
Oh, hell yeah. So awesome. And 300. Come on now.
Yes.
So that was what I saw this week. V, I believe you saw 2 new movies.
I did. Both of them have come out in about the last month or two. One was released on streaming, and I'll talk about that one first. It's based on a book. It's called Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Oh.
It's an LGBT rom-com about the first son of the United States. His mother is the president, and she is played by Uma Thurman, which was a lot of fun to see. Yes,
that's pretty sweet.
And the second Prince of England.
Whoa, interesting.
It's, like I said, based on a book. Apparently, the book was a bestseller. I've never read it, but I've heard good things online about this movie. It was released directly on Amazon Prime, and I absolutely adored it.
Oh, cool.
From start to finish, the storyline is super sweet and also very relevant for our times, and it was wonderful seeing that representation on screen as well. It was an absolute joy to watch from beginning to end. I loved all the cast in it as well. I highly recommend it for anyone who's a fan of rom-coms.
Okay, I will have to check that one out then.
Yeah, it's called Red, White, and Royal Blue, and it's streaming on Amazon Prime.
Awesome.
And the last movie, I finally caught up with you.
Yes.
Watched. I didn't end up seeing this in theaters, even though it's still playing in theaters.
It is still playing in theaters. It's actually at the Dollar Theater here in town, and I've been debating going to see it again in theaters.
I might need to actually take advantage of that and go see it in theaters while it's still there.
Yeah.
I instead watched it on Disney Plus, and this movie is from Pixar, and it is now, I believe, my all-time favorite Pixar movie because I am talking about Elemental.
Hey, look at that.
Why did this movie not get more love this summer?
I don't have any idea. I made a reel about this movie after seeing it in theaters because the marketing was not great. The trailer did not make it seem interesting at all. But when Vee and I made a pact that we were going to do what we could to see every movie that is released in theaters, I decided I would check it out. I saw it in 3D. And if you've seen my reel on our Instagram or TikTok, you know that I absolutely love this movie and saw it 2 more times in theaters. And yes, I absolutely have already watched it on Disney Plus streaming as well.
It should have been big like Inside Out.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree. I don't know what happened with the marketing campaign on it. I truly do not know, but this movie is absolutely wonderful.
Transcendent.
Yeah, no, the animation is gorgeous. The colors are really vibrant. The story between Ember and Wade is amazing. The family drama between Ember and her family is fantastic. I relate to both of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
I could not get enough of this movie. And Vee, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it because when you texted me that one photo of Wade's mother, I just knew immediately that you were in.
Absolutely. And for me personally, when I saw the marketing for this movie, when I saw a trailer for this movie, all I could think of is, oh, it's Pixar's version of Zootopia.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And while some parallels can be drawn, it is its own movie. It is wonderfully told. It is an important message. And I think because Zootopia didn't do overall great and doesn't have, a huge following, I think that's maybe why it got lost in the shuffle. I'm so glad that it had a very disappointing opening weekend, and now it's huge for Disney.
Yeah.
And
that's flourishing right now.
Yeah, and that's actually why it's still in theaters, is because people are still going to see it.
Yep.
Absolutely go see this movie. Like I said, it is now my all-time favorite Pixar film. Thank you so much for continuing to be that voice in my ear saying, you need to watch this, you need to watch this.
Oh, for sure.
It just released on Disney Plus about a week ago, so if you want to stay home and watch it, that's fine. But like we said, it's still in theaters, and so yes, in any format, watch this movie.
I completely agree. And Vee, if you have not yet, there is a making of documentary on Disney Plus about Peter Sohn and the making of this movie, and I really think you should watch it. It gets me every time.
Oh,
It's just a wonderfully sweet movie. The relationship between Ember and Wade is just fantastic. The animation is it's
gorgeous.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely out of this world. And that's the cool thing, is because it's a completely made-up world. Yeah, it's great. If anybody's a fan of Inside Out, Soul, or Zootopia, you definitely got to see this movie because it has elements of all three.
It really does, including the soundtrack really reminded me of great soundtrack.
Absolutely. Oh, it's just so good. It's so wonderful. The hot air balloon moment between Wade and Ember is one of my favorite moments in this entire movie.
Yes.
The way she tells that story and just the connection that they make so early on is it's just so fucking sweet. Like, I can't get enough of it. I love it so much, and I'm so glad you did too.
Yes, and I'm so glad we can talk about it on this podcast and hopefully encourage others to watch it because it absolutely is something that needs to be seen.
I completely agree. All right, well, now that we've gotten that out of the way, Vee, I believe we start with your pick this week, which I can't wait to get into.
And is perfect because it was actually released first.
Hey, look, this is like the 3rd episode that we're going in order of time.
Yes, that happens from time to time, and we always appreciate that nice little coincidence. This week, we picked Mel Brooks movies.
Hell yeah.
In the magical year of 1974.
Look at that.
Starring Gene Wilder.
Hell yeah.
So we're getting very specific with this week's episode theme.
We are, and similar to our Billy Wilder and Jack Lemmon episodes several episodes ago.
Yes, the partnership of a great director with a great actor is a lot of fun to explore. There are a lot of other opportunities for that in the future, and that I'm sure we'll enjoy getting into as well.
Hell yeah.
So for this week, in 1974, Mel Brooks released 2 comedy classics.
Indeed he did.
That are some of the best comedies ever made.
Oh, that's an understatement, absolutely.
And not only did they come from the same man, they also came from the same year. Like, how hot was he?
Hell yeah.
The genius of this man to be able to do this in the same year is so bonkers.
It really is. It's pretty badass. And he was in his 40s, for fuck's sake.
And the great man is still alive.
He is indeed.
So I need to stop teasing our audience. I need to come out with what the name of the movie is I picked this week. It stars Gene Wilder. It also stars Cleavon Little. This is Blazing Saddles.
Hell yeah.
I'm so glad you enjoyed watching this movie as an adult.
Yeah, I got home, made some dinner, said to my wife, I'm watching Blazing Saddles for the podcast tonight. If you'd like to watch it with me. She goes, I've seen it. It's stupid. I said, okay, that's fine. So I went upstairs and put it on. She sat next to me and played her Switch. And I cried, laughed my entire ass off for an hour and 32 minutes. And she kept looking at me with a face of like, how do you think this is funny? But it is. It's absolutely fucking hysterical comedy gold.
She is in an extremely small minority of people who don't think this movie is funny. She is an outlier.
Oh, for sure. Yes, yeah. And that's fine. I get it. My wife, you know.
No, it's not.
She does come off as a little bit of sophisticated, but she does like some raunch comedy and some off, politically incorrect comedy every now and then. But for some reason, she didn't like this one. But I can't wait to learn about how this one went down. And again, it made me laugh endlessly.
Yes, and I am excited to tell you a little bit about the trivia. And one argument that I'll make now, I was actually planning on talking about this towards the end so we can revisit it, but Mel Brooks is so deft at making a ridiculous movie that is just on this side of cringy. Mm-hmm. And I think that is towing this line that is so hard to keep on the right side of. And I think that's why so many people still find his movies so funny, is that these movies are completely off the wall ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not cringy. They're not like, oh, God, he went too far kind of thing.
No, I didn't feel that for a second watching Blazing Saddles.
And even though he breaks the fourth wall and gets into utter lunacy at the end of this movie, which I'll get into.
Awesome.
Okay, so it starts off with a character named Hedley Lamar. Not Hetty. It is Hedley Lamar. And he is just an all-around rich jerk who's trying to grab more land, power, and money any way he can. He's going to go about this with a scheme to own the railroad and have it go right through the town of Rockridge. And he says to his sidekick Taggart, "Oh, once the railroad goes through Rockridge, that property's going to be worth millions. How do I, except for those pesky landowners. All right, how do I drive everybody out of town so I can get all their lands?" And we have been introduced to a black man who is working on the railroad, actually. Of course, him and everybody else working on the railroad, who are all minorities, are abused mercilessly.
Oh, yeah.
And Taggart is actually running this work crew. And so this black man, Bart, is really just fed up and hits Taggart over the head with a shovel, which is very satisfying.
It is. And who's Taggart, V?
Taggart.
Took me a second. It really took me a second. Because I recognized the voice and I recognized the eyes, but the mustache is what threw me off.
And he was a little bit heavier in this movie.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I think you should tell everybody who he was.
Oh, okay. This was Slim Pickens from my pick of Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. He played General Kong.
He did, in the classic scene of him riding a bomb, if any moviegoer would recognize.
So awesome.
So awesome. And so...
What about Major Kong?
And so this poor black man, Bart, is about to be hung because of his assault on Taggart. But Hedley has recently received a message from the town of Rockridge that their sheriff has been murdered. And what is his brilliant solution? Well, to hire someone that would be so offensive to the townsfolk, it would absolutely run them all out of town and they'd never want to step foot in it again. He'll hire a black sheriff. And this is the point in the description of this movie that I will tell you. It is complete and utter satire.
Yes.
And a lot of people argue that movies like this, movies like Tropic Thunder, satirical movies could not be made today.
Right.
I absolutely argue against that anytime anybody brings that up, because
absolutely.
This whole entire movie is making fun of racist rednecks.
Mm-hmm.
They're all portrayed as idiotic assholes.
Yes.
They're all portrayed as on the wrong side. This movie does not make fun of any minorities.
No, not at all.
That is satire. It's making fun of the powers that be in ridiculous ways. That is why this movie has not, quote unquote, aged poorly. Is not offensive, and could absolutely be made today, or better yet, just still holds up.
It absolutely does.
And so there are tons of racial slurs in this movie, all done for irony, all done for satire. And so definitely prepare yourself, if any of you have never seen this movie, that it is satirical, but there is a ton of racism in it, in order to illustrate how fucking awful and stupid racists are.
Yes, exactly.
And it does that beautifully and always makes me so happy.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because racists are, in fact, idiots.
Some of the biggest idiots on the planet, for sure.
That's right. And so now Bart is saved from hanging and waltzes into town as the new sheriff.
Good God, this scene fucking... Oh my God, I loved it so much when he walks into town and he gets up on that podium
and everybody's
and then he takes
silent.
him fucking self-hostage. It was just fucking brilliant. I could not believe what I was watching. And I was laughing at the same time. I was lightheaded from laughing so hard. And I was like holding onto my wife's leg and she's like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Are you not seeing this?" This is fucking amazing.
Yes, it is so funny because when he gets up on stage, as you say, all of the towns, it's dead silent, very awkward silence. Tumbleweeds are rolling by.
Yeah, and they're like welcoming him. They don't know that he is a black man at the time.
No.
So they've got like this whole welcoming committee, ready to just like, "Oh, welcome, sheriff." And they're like, "Wait a minute."
And then they see him and the sign just rolls up.
Yes, yeah, classic gag.
They get all super pissed, and so in order to get himself out of the situation, Bart literally takes himself hostage.
So unreal.
"Drop out your weapons, everybody. This man's serious."
I love when he looks at the camera too. Like you said, there's a lot of fourth wall breaking, and during this scene especially, because he just like kind of looks at the camera like, "Here we go."
Yes, and that was actually pulled from Mel Brooks's real life experience.
Oh,
he was a kid and stole candy and a Pop Rocks gun from the store, and
oh gosh.
the clerk caught him, and he pulls the gun and aims it at the clerk.
What?
And the clerk stands there and lets him leave, and he's like, "Dude, you just saw me steal this pop gun."
Pulling from real life, gotta love it.
Yes. And so that's how this poor Bart is introduced to this town, and unfortunately they are extremely unwelcoming because he is black. But thankfully, he meets a new friend who has been in the town jail for a little bit, the local drunk, played by Gene Wilder. He used to be called the Waco Kid.
Yes.
And now...
Well, my name is Jim, but most people call me... Jim.
I love it.
It's so fucking simple. But the delivery of Gene Wilder in that moment is just, I loved it. I completely was, I fell in love with Gene Wilder again.
Yes.
Oh yeah, no, it's so fucking hysterical.
They become fast friends, and he becomes basically Bart's deputy, which is great because Hedley Lamar is very impatient, is really upset that none of these town folk have left because of his hiring of the black sheriff, and so he puts more plans in motion to rustle up a big crew of bad guys in order to take over this town and run Bart out of it. And the people he recruits are ridiculous. There's a whole long line of just criminals,
I love
right?
That scene.
And there's like Hell's Angels. Again, this movie is completely ridiculous because it is not time period accurate in any way. They have updated music. They have references to pop culture from the 70s. It's ridiculous. And so the line
Looney
of
Tunes reference was amazing.
Looney Tunes reference. They have a Looney Tunes reference in this movie. And so he's hiring Hell's Angels, Ku Klux Klan guys, the guys, the Mexicans who say badges, we don't need no stinking badges. He's got a bunch of those guys on his team. It's just utter ridiculousness. And the nice thing is that as Bart is continually his charming self, he really starts to win over the townsfolk, which is good because Headley is sending all he thinks of after Bart to get rid of him too, including my favorite character of the whole movie, Lily von Stupp.
Oh,
played
Madeline
by
Kahn.
Madeline, the late great Madeline Kahn,
So good.
who is basically a cabaret / sex worker under Headley's employ, and he hires her to try to seduce Bart and get him distracted and not paying attention to what Headley's up to. And of course it backfires because she just falls in love with him.
Yep.
And she has a great song that's really hilarious and satirical called I'm Tired, which is a fantastic number in this movie.
Definitely.
And so it's all just this ridiculous satire of a Western that is just so fun from start to finish. And as things start to culminate, Mel Brooks just completely pushes this envelope.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the final battle sequence, they spill out into the Warner Brothers lot.
Oh my gosh. When the camera pans back and all of a sudden like cuts left and you're seeing all the sound stages, I texted you. I was like, what the fuck is going on? But I was loving it all. I was like, okay, this is a movie within a movie within. This is fantastic. I am completely along for this ride.
And the funny thing is, you just sent me what the fuck is going on, and I knew exactly what point of the movie you were at.
Yeah, I'll bet. Exactly, yeah.
I was like, yep.
Especially when they're in the commissary. You're like, what in the...
And it
Wait a
turns
minute.
into a food fight.
And then I got to tell you, another great moment in this movie is Dom DeLuise being the director of that fucking Broadway dance number with these dudes in these
It's like
top
a Fred
hats and
Astaire
canes.
movie.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Just stick out your tush. Da-da-da-da. Like, it's fucking hysterical. And I've heard that song I don't know how many times.
Right?
So it really was like... And there's so much familiarity to this movie that like really makes it, like you said, you could have made this movie today and it would still have the same effect.
Absolutely. It gets more and more to a point where Headley Lamar goes, I gotta get out of here. And he takes a taxi and he goes to the Grom's Chinese Theater to the premiere of Blazing Saddles.
Yeah. Oh, it's just ridiculous.
So ridiculous.
And so did Bart and Jim. They ended up there as well.
Yeah. And so this movie is just so over the top amazing. But again, it's not over the top stupid.
No,
it's
not
over
at
the
all.
top ridiculous and hilarious.
Yeah, no, it's completely it's just so fucking funny.
Yes, and Mel
Can't
Brooks
say it enough.
actually makes a cameo in this movie playing the governor.
Another moment with tears of laughter streaming from my face.
And he's
I
got
love that sequence.
His secretary who's dressed up in a like nightie or lingerie.
Yeah, total sex worker status.
Yeah, super booby. It's just super skimpy clothes that she's in, and
He talks to him. That was another favorite part of mine. When he starts talking to her breasts, I fucking
I missed
lost
you
it.
last night.
Yeah.
And so now Mel Brooks is doing political commentary as well. And even though this movie is set in 1874 and made in 1974, the political commentary is still relevant to today too, right? I mean,
for
just
sure.
talking shit about how corrupt government officials are, that's still completely relevant.
100%. Oh, I loved that whole exchange between the governor and Headley, and when they finally end up going like at each other, like right before he sits back down to sign that piece of paper. Good God, I could not stop laughing. I wanted to rewind it, but I didn't want to have to put my wife through that again because I was having such a great time.
Well, I'm so glad you had a great time, and there are just so many great one-liners and clips and, again, commentary in this movie. It's so hard to pick. I talked to you about this before we started. It would be so hard to pick the audio clips that I loved in this movie because there were so many, and I wrote down so many. But I can tell you my all-time favorite scene of this movie is when Bart has tried to be friends or friendly with the townspeople, hoping they would accept him.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they all reject him repeatedly. And he's kind of moping back at the sheriff's station.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim, played by Gene Wilder, is there really comforting him. And the explanation he gives is just so... It's just an explanation of this movie, too, and the commentary on races. And so, again, this is my favorite scene of the whole movie.
What did you expect? Welcome, Sonny. Make yourself at home. marry my daughter, you've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. These are people of the land. The common clay of the New West. You know, morons.
And Gene Wilder improvised the end of it.
Oh, really?
Cleavon Little was not aware of the, morons line. So when he laughs in that scene, that reaction is 100% real because Gene Wilder
Nice.
completely improvised that line.
Hell yeah. That's fantastic.
Yes. And thankfully, Bart is not alone, though, because not only does he have his friend Jim, but all of his friends from the railroad, all of the black men who are working on the railroad, come to help him as well. And then I love this part where he rolls back into the railroad site, and his friend goes, "Bart, what? I thought you was hung." And he goes, "And they were right." This movie is very risque in so many ways, but for all of the right reasons, and it's hilarious with all of the jokes they make. And I can tell you even Mel Brooks can back me up because he wrote the movie out of anger at white corruption, racism, and Bible-thumping bigotry.
Hey, nice.
Yeah. And so, as we said, Gene Wilder plays Jim, or the Waco Kid in this movie. I'm a big fan of his and his wonderful, dearly departed wife, Gilda Radner. Both hilarious people. He really kicked off his career with The Producers, which is a Mel Brooks movie.
It is, and it's one that I could not get past about 15 minutes of.
Really?
Yeah, it really made me uncomfortable.
That's
and
fair.
it wasn't the satirical anything like that, because I know there's the whole springtime for Hitler and keep it gay and all that kind of stuff. Right. It wasn't anything like that. It was just the Gene Wilder and the other guy. Their first meeting was really weird to me, and I remember feeling that way when I actually had seen the remake with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. Mm-hmm. It just rubbed me the wrong way about the Broderick and Wilder character in this movie, and I was just like, I can't do this. Like, there's something about this movie that I just cannot continue with. So
fair.
Yeah, maybe I need to give it another shot now that I love Blazing Saddles. I don't know, but it was one of the few Mel Brooks movies that I actually was like, not for me.
Well, that's okay, because we're going to get into Mel Brooks movies, and there's one that neither of us enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
Gene Wilder was also in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes.
All subsequent remakes, prequels, or sequels are crimes against humanity, and I will not stand for them.
Oh, but Timothy Shamalama Ding Dong is going to be great.
Oh, God, both of us agree. We've seen that trailer together in theaters and turned to each other and go, that looks awful.
Yeah, it looks pretty bad.
Gene Wilder was also in Silver Streak, Stir Crazy, and he's in this comedy, Haunted Honeymoon, with his real-life wife, Gilda Radner, and Dom DeLuise stars in it.
Nice.
I watched that as a kid, like really little kid, say 7 or 8.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because my sister watched it when she was a teenager and thought it was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Haunted Honeymoon has a guy in a werewolf mask.
Oh.
It scared the ever-loving shit out of me. It is one of the first movies that I can remember that I was absolutely terrified of.
Oh, wow.
I was so fucking scared after that of werewolves, of dark places.
Oh,
I was so scared. And then I watched it in my 20s and laughed my ass off because it's funny.
Perfect. You got over your fear.
I just didn't get it at the time because I was 8.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. And then Gene Wilder's last roles were a couple of quick appearances on Will and Grace, but he was so memorable. He was only in 2 episodes, but he was Mr. Stein, one of Will's bosses. And God, every scene of his is hilarious in that show. He was so good all the way up until the end. Unfortunately, Gene Wilder passed away in 2016.
Yeah, that was a sad day.
It was. He had a good long life. He was 83 when he passed away.
Wow.
Yeah, he was born in 1933.
That's nuts. Gene Wilder is actually in a great comedy from 1989 that I was introduced to by my friend Kimberly. Years ago, my friend Kimberly and I would spend 1 or 2 days a week hanging out with each other and watching movies, and I would introduce Kimberly to a movie she hadn't seen and vice versa. So this one was a movie that she introduced me to, and it stars Gene Wilder and Richard fucking Pryor.
Yes.
And it's called See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
Yes.
And it is fucking hysterical because Gene Wilder is deaf, so he hears no evil, and Richard Pryor is blind, so he sees no evil. And it is a very, very funny movie. And I wanted to bring that up because I imagine you're going to get into who wrote this movie soon.
Yes, and I can tell you that Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor partnered several times during their careers.
So awesome.
Including Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, and god damn it, they were so funny together.
Yeah, they really were fantastic duo.
Harvey Korman plays Hedley Lamar in this movie. He was in the Carol Burnett show the entire run.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He was hilarious in everything he did. He was a phenomenal comedian with not only great timing, but just ingenuity and genius. And my grandfather worked on the Carol Burnett show for years and not only spoke so highly of Carol, who just turned 90 this year, but also of everyone on that set, including Harvey, and just said they were all generous, wonderful people on stage and off it. And so
Awesome.
I'm always so happy to see anybody from that show in some of the movies that we do. And it was, he is so funny. Harvey Korman is so funny in this movie too. And just,
yeah, he's great.
such a great jerk that you just love to hate.
Yeah.
And as I said, Madeline Kahn plays Lily von Stupp in this movie. She unfortunately died in 1999 at the age of 57.
Wow, really? She was only 57.
Yeah, she died of ovarian cancer.
Oh, that's terrible.
She was in that classic Ryan and Tatum O'Neal movie Paper Moon, where
Never saw that one.
Tatum as a child got an Oscar nomination.
Oh, wow.
She was in another Mel Brooks movie, History of the World Part 1.
Oh, yes.
She voices a character in A Bug's Life.
Is that right?
She voices...
Oh, yeah. I think I know who it is.
Guess.
She's the butterfly.
Yes, the gypsy moth. You're right.
Gypsy. Oh, the moth. Okay, yeah. I thought she was a butterfly for some reason.
No, the semantics. No, you're right. Good job.
Okay, yeah. She's got the grasshopper old man husband.
His husband, yeah, who's like the magician.
Yes.
Oh,
That's awesome.
We got to cover that movie at some point.
Yeah, great movie.
And my all-time favorite role of hers is in Clue, which is on the list of movies coming up. I'm so excited to discuss the movie Clue. She plays Mrs. White, who has one of my all-time favorite lines in all of movies just because I love it so much and I laugh every time and I quote it, my sister and I quote it to each other all the time. So excited to get into that. But she plays Mrs. White in Clue and absolutely love her in that too.
I think I saw Clue in 1991 and have never seen it since.
Oh my God, I cannot wait to reintroduce you to that movie with Tim Curry then.
Oh, yeah. Tim Curry, my wife is a fan of the movie. It was never one for me to be like, oh, I'll watch that one again.
Oh, no
But again,
worries.
I watched it when I was like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah, I'll totally reintroduce it to you. No worries.
Sweet.
Andrew Bergman is one of the writers on this movie, and I bring up his name. There were 5 writers on this movie, including Mel Brooks. Most of them went on to do either various little projects or mostly TV. Andrew Bergman is the one that was a bit notable for me because he also co-wrote Soap Dish, which I think is a very funny movie.
It is actually very entertaining. My wife and I watched that during COVID lockdown, actually.
Nice.
I'd been wanting to watch it because it's referenced in an episode of Arrested Development. And I was like, what is Soap Dish?
Oh, yes,
and I finally watched it.
Yeah.
I was like, what is Soap Dish? And I finally watched it. I was like, it's not actually a bad movie.
No, it's actually
pretty entertaining.
And there are so many people in it, too.
Oh, yeah. It's a stacked cast.
It is a stacked cast. And also Andrew Bergman helped write the movie Fletch with Chevy Chase, which I love.
Yeah. Classic comedy.
Yes. Richard Pryor was also a co-writer on this movie.
Perfect.
And as we discuss, Mel Brooks not only directed both of our movies, but wrote them both too.
Indeed.
Mel Brooks was born in 1926.
Nuts.
That man
He's going to be 100 soon.
He is going to be 100 soon. His sweet wife, Anne Bancroft, unfortunately died nearly 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
His best friend, Carl Reiner, recently passed away as well.
That's right. He was 93 or 4, I think. The thing is, these comedic geniuses, they've had the perfect fucking life, so why would you die?
Exactly. And the routine of having dinner together between that Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner had, it was so sweet, and I feel very sad for him that his best friend is now no longer with him. But
definitely,
it seems like he still has a really wonderful support group, and so
oh yeah,
I hope he stays with us for much longer. He's amazing.
I hope so too. I believe it was an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee where Mel Brooks, or it was Carl Reiner and Jerry Seinfeld. I can't remember which one of them.
I think it might have been Carl.
But they go to Mel Brooks' house to have lunch.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, we've been doing this for the last 70 years. And you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. That's incredible. Like, you just laugh all fucking day. And Carl Reiner, for those that don't know, he was the creator and writer of The Dick Van Dyke Show, which is another perfect series. And he was Saul in the Ocean's 11 movies with George Clooney. Carl Reiner was an absolute comedic genius, as is Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, and so on and so forth.
Well, as is his son, Rob, who we discussed in the episode where I picked Princess Bride.
And when Harry Met Sally.
When Harry Met Sally. That's right. God, just a hilarious family. And so beyond the movies we picked this week and the producers, Mel Brooks also wrote and directed, as I said, The History of the World Part 1, Spaceballs.
Yeah.
Neither of us liked that movie.
Sorry.
I think we're the wrong generation. I think we're too young.
I don't know what it is. It just, for whatever reason, didn't land for me. And
same.
It is what it is. No offense, Mr. Brooks, if you ever listen to this episode.
Yes, and I just think for me, if I was Gen X, I probably would have gotten that movie a little bit better.
Maybe.
And so, yeah, unfortunately not the biggest fan of Spaceballs. However, we are both humongous fans of his 90s comedy, Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Oh, hell yeah. Fantastic movie. Can't wait to discuss that one too.
Fantastic movie. And he also was the creator and writer of the show Get Smart back in the day.
Oh, was he really? I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, which is That's awesome. And then there was the remake with Steve Carell and Anne Hathaway and The Rock, which I think is a really funny movie. I thought it was hilarious.
All right. I might need to revisit that one. I don't know.
No worries. So there's another very classic scene in this movie that we actually haven't discussed yet.
Ah.
All of the cowboys are sitting around a campfire.
Oh, yes.
Eating their dinner.
That's the only scene I truly remember from this movie as a kid, and the song that Madeline Kahn sings. Those are like the only two moments of Blazing Saddles I remember when I saw this movie when I was like 9 years old or something like that. I think it was on TV, and I turned it on right around the bean eating scene. It was one of those moments as a child,
Which as a child, of course you'd remember, and of course you'd think is funny because it's fart jokes.
Yeah, and it still is funny.
It's still hilarious. It's a campfire at night scene of all these cowboys eating dinner, and all they're doing is farting. Loud, over-the-top farts. And it's because when Mel Brooks thought about old Westerns and how all these guys, all these cowboys would only consume black coffee and plates of beans, of course they would inevitably be farting all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
it's funny,
true.
Watching this movie, too, and every time I watch a Western, I'm like, what did it smell like back then?
Oh, awful. Can you imagine how horrible those cowboys smelled?
Yeah, no deodorant. They have toilet paper. How'd they clean themselves? It just had to stink.
No changes of clothes.
No. Yeah, they're in the same clothes for weeks on end.
Yeah. Ugh. But in that scene, it officially marks the first time the sound of farting has ever been used in film.
No kidding. Yeah. Wow. That's pretty hilarious.
Which is another reason why in 1974 that was such a memorable scene, because it was so outlandish that there would be actual farting in a movie at that time. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And now we have scenes like Dumb and Dumber and Bridesmaid where they just take it to the nth degree. And unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, when this film was screened for Warner Brothers executives, none of them laughed.
Oh, geez.
Mel Brooks was worried that the studio wouldn't even release the movie.
Ooh, really?
So he quickly scheduled another screening, but this time for all of the studio's employees.
Oh, nice.
And all these regular folks got together in the theater and laughed their asses off.
Perfect.
And so Warner Brothers was like, sure, we'll go ahead and release it.
Yeah, that's all it took.
And the reason why Mel Brooks was a little bit nervous is because there were so many things in this movie that Warner Brothers didn't like.
Oh, really?
The farting, the racial slurs, Madeline Kahn's character, the fact that she seduces Bart in that whole scene.
Oh, yeah,
Her song, I'm Tired.
Right.
There are so many things this movie that are very pearl clutching for studio executives. But Mel Brooks had final cut written into his contract.
Perfect.
And that's,
wow, already.
Yeah, so that's why we got the movie we see today.
Good for him. That's badass.
Now, Hedley Lamar often gets mistaken and called Hedy Lamar in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Hedy, it's Hedley Lamar.
The hell are you worried about? This is 1874. You'll be able to sue her.
After this movie was released, Hedy Lamar sued Mel Brooks.
No way.
She sure did.
Oh, wow.
They settled out of court, and Mel just said he was flattered by this attention.
That's great.
As I said, Richard Pryor was a co-writer on this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, the role of Bart was intended for him. He was supposed to play Bart.
Oh, wow. That would have been something.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Richard Pryor was also very controversial with his stand-up routines. He definitely pushed the line.
Yeah.
He was out there. He was amazing. He was hilarious. But he also had a lot of struggles with drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And Mel Brooks actually couldn't secure financing with Pryor in the role. So he had to find somebody else. But instead made him co-writer because he really wanted to support his friend, who's also Gene Wilder's friend. The final straw which made Mel Brooks recast the role is that Richard Pryor called up Mel Brooks at the very beginning of pre-production and said, "Hey man, I can't make it in today." And Mel Brooks says, "Why?" And Richard Pryor says, "Well, I'm in Cleveland and I'm not sure how I got here."
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. That's where we got
wow.
Cleavon Little, who wasn't a well-known name. He was a big Broadway actor, actually, and so he doesn't have a huge movie career after this. He's in some TV throughout the rest of his career, but this was his biggest film, and it's mainly because he was a Broadway actor.
That's pretty awesome.
Mel Brooks has gone on record to say, "I'm Tired" is the dirtiest song he's ever written in his life.
Nice.
Which... I'm not surprised. It's a dirty song.
No, yeah,
and it's hilarious. And it's great. And I know you'll like this piece of trivia. For all of the shooting they did in the desert, all those scenes really that's truly out there, Slim Pickens just stayed on location.
Oh, wow. Did he really?
He brought his RV out there, parked it, and would sit out front in the evenings with a campfire and a Winchester rifle.
Very cool. And that looked like it was Vasquez Rocks, if I'm not mistaken.
Very good catch. It was Vasquez Rocks.
Yeah.
Classic filming location, right?
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, that's where Bedrock was made.
Bedrock?
Right? That's where, from the town of Bedrock, Flintstones.
God, not again.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to do the Flintstones on this podcast, for sure.
Tear it to shreds, I'm sure.
I probably will, too.
Oh, good. Okay.
And it'll be my pick. We'll do a How Did This Get Made on Movies You Missed podcast.
Perfect. That won't get us sued or anything.
I don't think it will. I'm sure they'd love it.
Referencing another fantastic film podcast for all of our listeners out there.
Hell yeah.
Blazing Saddles had only a $2.6 million budget.
Wow.
Guess how much it made?
Oh, geez.
In the worldwide box office.
Worldwide box office, 1974. I'm going to say it was in the $118 million.
Oh my God. $120 million.
Oh, damn. I was close.
Yeah, and it's actually like
nice.
119.8, and so I just rounded it up to 120.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
Nicely done.
Awesome.
And that, folks, is Blazing Saddles, released in 1974 in February, in fact, which is how we're going chronologically this episode.
Yeah.
It still holds up. It's still hilarious. I watched it with my mother a couple months ago. We both laughed our asses off. And you can watch it right now if you have a Showtime subscription.
Hell yeah. I rented it off of Apple and absolutely had an incredible time. I will be adding this movie to my collection. There's no question.
Yay! I'm so glad to hear it. There is a ton of DVD commentary. You will really enjoy it.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
And now it's time for us to shuffle over with our hands held in front of us to John's side of the aisle.
Mm.
For his Mel Brooks pick of the week.
And if you didn't get that reference that I just made, I am doing the 1974, written by Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, directed by Mel Brooks, starring Gene Wilder, Terry Garr, Cloris Leachman, Marty Feldman, Peter Boyle, Madeline Kahn. This is Young fucking Frankenstein, everybody.
Just thinking about it makes me laugh.
Oh, yeah. And there's no other way to introduce this movie other than Young fucking Frankenstein, because this movie is a classic piece of cinema comedic gold. I love this movie. I saw this movie when I was a kid. My grandfather introduced me to this movie. I watched it, I think I was about 8 years old. I had seen the original Frankenstein, which we discussed last year in our October slew of horror movies. We did our creature feature episode, and I discussed the original that this one is satirized from.
Uh-huh.
So I don't really need to get into the story.
Not really.
Not really, but I'm going to, because why not? That's what we do here. But we don't spoil anything, even though I'm sure half of the world has seen Frankenstein at this point. And I would hope that half of the world has also seen Young Frankenstein, but I'm sure there are people that haven't, and that's fine. So for those that have not seen Young Frankenstein, this movie is set years after the events of the original Frankenstein. So this movie actually begins with us being introduced to Frederick Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein, ladies and gentlemen, because Frederick Frankenstein wants to be completely detached from his grandfather's escapades when he, brought dead tissue back to life, and the chaos that ensued from his grandfather in the bringing to life of this monster.
My grandfather's research was doo-doo.
Yeah. And he stabs his leg right with a scalpel, and then he tries to cover it from the class by crossing his leg. So after Frankenstein has dismissed his class, and he is now by himself reflecting, pulling the scalpel out of his leg, really. So he's visited upon by this older gentleman that brings him a telegram that his great-grandfather has actually passed away. He has now been told that he has inherited this castle in Transylvania, and he's basically like, you know what, fuck it, let me go check it out, right? Why not? Let's see what the old man left for me.
Classic morbid curiosity.
Of course, everybody has it.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes there to Transylvania to this castle.
By taking a train, by the way.
Yes,
which is so hysterical.
Taking a train, and we find out that he's actually engaged to this beautiful woman that is apparently saving their first kiss for their wedding day, and she is played by Madeline Kahn. And she is already just somebody that you really kind of just hate already, but at the same time, she's very engaging and she's very hilarious. So it all just kind of comes together very well.
Playing the opposite character of her character in Blazing Saddles.
Yes, exactly. And her name is Elizabeth, and like I said, she will not let Frederick Frankenstein kiss her on the lips because she just wants to save that excitement for their wedding day. So Frederick gets on this train, ends up in Transylvania, and he meets Igor, who is played by Marty Feldman. God, it's just so fucking funny because if anybody's seen this movie, Marty Feldman has those crazy eyes, right? Like, immediately you're kind of like, whoa, because you hear him, you don't see him at first, and through all the fog and everything in Transylvania, he goes, Dr. Frankenstein, and then you look down and there's this zoom in, there's this push in on his face, and he's got that crazy smile, and he's just like, oh yes, who are you? He goes, I'm Igor. I'm here to take you to the castle and to show you around your grandfather's old stomping grounds, basically. As we meet Igor, we notice that he's got a hump on his back, basically like, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? Mm-hmm. Frederick is kind of like, if you need a little help with that hump, I might be able to help you out with it. And Igor's like, what hump are you talking about? And if you notice throughout this movie, the hump moves from left to right throughout the entire movie, and that actually ended up being something Marty Feldman just kind of came up with on his own.
Oh my
And during
God.
dailies, they realized what was going on, and they loved it so much that they didn't tell him to stop. So it just ended up being a perfect gag that just continued on through the production of this movie.
Perfect gag for this movie.
So awesome. So awesome. So Frederick gets to the house and just kind of sees, a little bit of what's going on. This is when we meet Frau Brucker. And if you have seen this movie, you understand the horse there, because apparently Frau Brucker is supposed to be just this terrifying woman that horses just are not wanting to be around. So every time we hear her name, the horses do their thing.
And who plays Frau Brucker?
The Oscar-winning, my old pal, Cloris Leachman, who signed my DVD copy of Young Frankenstein, which is in my hand right now, that says, to John, love Cloris Leachman. and I love it so much. Because I was very fortunate enough to spend 3 days with Cloris Leachman on a project many, many years ago, and I actually did almost nothing but talk to her about Young Frankenstein and Beer Fest, because I love Beer Fest, and she's in Beer Fest as well. But yeah, she was an absolutely wonderful human being. Her memory of the production of this movie was incredible. She just would not stop talking to me about it, and I love that because I came to her about it. I was like, "Hey, Cloris, I'm a big fan. I just want to tell you that I've been watching Young Frankenstein since I was like 8 years old with my grandfather." And she pulled me down. She goes, "Isn't it a perfect movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it actually is it's a perfect fucking movie. It's so funny. I love when the horses go crazy, and I love when I love this moment in the movie right when we are introduced to her and she's kind of showing him the lay of the land. Frederick's like, "You know what? I'm going to go to sleep. Thank you very much for everything." She goes, "Would the doctor..." Well, here, listen to this.
"Would the doctor care for a brandy before retiring?"
No. Thank you.
"Some warm milk, perhaps?"
No, thank you very much. No thanks.
"Ovaltine."
Nothing. Thank you.
So fucking funny. And all of that improvised by Cloris Leachman on the day.
Oh my god, awesome.
Just fantastic. And, another thing about this movie is this was written by Gene Wilder. He had actually started coming up with this treatment around the time Blazing Saddles was about to go into production.
Okay.
So think about that, right? You said that...
fast.
Yeah, super fast. And he was already friends with Mel Brooks, so they had
Of
that
course.
going for them, which
Right.
was great. He had approached Columbia about doing this movie, and Gene Wilder got in touch with his producer, Michael Gruskoff. Gruskoff had only read about 12 pages of this treatment, and he was also friends with Mel Brooks, and Blazing Saddles was just about to be released in February of 1974. Mel Brooks also gets a hold of this treatment from Gene Wilder, and he's basically like, what are you doing here, And Gene Wilder says to him, "Well, I kind of came up with a story, like, what if we made a movie, or somebody made a movie, about the grandson of Victor Frankenstein." Remember, his name was originally Victor. Remember when we went into this last year, how they changed his name because they thought his name was actually scary, so in the original movie, he's Henry Frankenstein.
Oh, that's right. But he's really
Yes.
Victor.
But he's really Victor
story.
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Right. So Mel Brooks was like, "Okay, cool. So what's your plan for this? What did you really hope to accomplish for this?" Gene Wilder said, "My dream, Mel, is to write this with you and to have you direct this movie." And they sat down and they started really coming up with a whole bunch of stuff. Now, a lot of this movie is also improvised. There's just so much comedic genius going down in front of and behind the cameras during the production of this movie. And every take was done between 10 and 15 times because nobody could keep a straight fucking face while shooting these scenes. And I watched the documentary. I've seen the documentary on the making of this movie I don't know how many times, and it still makes me laugh watching Gene Wilder and Terry Garr break up in the middle of a scene because they just can't get through it without laughing. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like Mel Brooks, comedic genius, Gene Wilder, comedic genius. This movie, Blazing Saddles, comedy gold. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often as it should anymore. And this was the year that we got two of the greatest comedies, satirical, if anything, of all time.
Of all time. And
Of all time.
I would argue that Terry Garr is the dark horse of this movie.
Oh, really?
She's not talked about as much as either
Oh, yeah, I see what you
Gene
mean.
Wilder or even Cloris Leachman, even though Cloris has a smaller part.
Right.
And of course, Peter Boyle. Terry Garr is hilarious from start to finish. The moment you are introduced to her, she's in the back of this cart full of hay and asks,
"Hello. Would you like to have a roll in the hay?"
the innuendos in this movie are hilarious between those two.
Oh, yeah. There's so
my
many
God.
great moments of sexual innuendo in this movie.
Oh, when they get to the castle finally, and there's, of course, these huge doors, and he goes, "What knockers?"
And she's leaning over him. Yeah, just like, "Oh, thank you, doctor." When she auditioned for the movie, she actually brought that German accent with her. It wasn't written with the intent of having her have a German accent. And originally, Madeline Kahn was written for that role. So when Madeline Kahn heard about the movie and read the script, she wanted to be Elizabeth. So they brought in Terry Garr to audition, and thank God Terry Garr's in it, because I love her in this movie. I also love her in Dumb and Dumber, if anybody remembers her in Dumb and Dumber. She is Mary Swanson's stepmother. And she's also in Tootsie. She has had an illustrious career, and she has always been very entertaining to watch. So it was great when I was a kid to see this and then see Dumb and Dumber however many years later and be like, oh, I recognize her. And good God, was she gorgeous in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So after the introduction of multiple characters, Frederick Frankenstein is laying in bed, and he is very much of the mind that he's not going to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. Here's footsteps. If anybody remembers that part of this movie. He doesn't want to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. He wants to be his own man. He wants to be remembered for not being a mad scientist, but for being a scientist of equal measure to, like Einstein and whatnot. Of course, that's just not how things work out. And in this room that he's staying in is a portrait of his grandfather that, of course, looks exactly like Gene Wilder.
Yes.
And it's one of those other moments that in so many movies nowadays, it's, there's the painting of the patriarch of the family, right? And it's always reacting to kind of what's going on in the world outside of that painting. So, of course, Gene Wilder, painted as his grandfather in this movie, keeps either, scowling or smiling, being excited about, what he's potentially going to find. Then, all of a sudden, we start hearing this violin music. Frederick's like, what the fuck is that? And, of course, this violin music leads him down to Frankenstein's laboratory. Now, the laboratory, all of those set pieces, I'm sure, is very recognizable to anybody that's seen the original Universal film Frankenstein, because they are the original set pieces from the OG fucking Frankenstein that Mel Brooks was able to commandeer for this movie, which was so badass.
That's right. Call back to last year's Frankenstein episode.
Yes, indeed. So awesome. So now Frederick is in his grandfather's laboratory.
Laboratory.
Laboratory. Thank you. Dexter's laboratory. So what's he going to do? He's going to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. So he decides that it's time to bring dead tissue to life. And he finds this body. He completely goes and becomes a grave robber. And I love this sequence, too, when he's transporting the body through town and the cop is talking to him and he uses the hand of Peter Boyle as his own hand. They bring back the body to the house. Frederick tells Igor that he's got to go and get this brain from Hans Dulbruck. Hans Dulbruck is actually a real scientist that existed. So, of course, why not be, again, satirical and mention a real living person in a Mel Brooks movie? What does Igor do? He grabs the brain, but unfortunately gets scared to death by his own reflection in a mirror that he drops this and grabs another brain. Everything ends up culminating, and we are now in the laboratory. It's time to bring the monster to life. The monster is brought to life, and Gene Wilder kills this sequence so much. Give my creature life! Just absolutely amazing, with all the lightning and all the thunder, and it's just
his
Terry
crazy
Garr
hair.
and Marty Feldman. Oh, the hair is incredible. And yeah, I love his doctor's coat and his stethoscope and everything. It's just so fantastic. And at one point or another, the monster wakes up. The monster's not right in the head. So after several moments of terror in this movie, they finally subdue the monster, and Frederick sits down and asks Igor about what brain he got.
Now, that brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbrooks? No. Ah, good. Would you mind telling me whose brain I did put in?
And you won't be angry?
I will not be angry.
Abby someone.
Abby someone. Abby who?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal.
I'm almost sure that was the name.
Are you saying that I put an abnormal brain into a 7.5-foot long, 54-inch wide gorilla? Is that what you're telling me? Quick, get him up!
My favorite scene of the whole entire movie.
Oh, it's so damn good.
God.
It's so fucking funny. Just absolutely hysterical. And that's the beauty of this movie, too, is, and another thing, V, your movie was actually shot in color. Mine was not.
That's right.
Yes, mine was shot in black and white, and the director of photography of this movie actually originally wanted to have it start in black and white, and then as it got closer to modern times, it to start to go into color. Mel Brooks was not about that. He wanted to keep it black and white, to keep it similar in tone and everything else, to the original Frankenstein, which of course,
Perfect
that's how
decision.
you do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely how you do it. And nothing against the cinematographer. It is beautifully shot. It's just, it works better in black and white than in color. And of course, you see the behind the scenes, and they're in black and white, which is awesome. So for the rest of this movie, what's Frederick going to do? Is he going to continue on with trying to figure out how to tame this beast and make him a functioning person of society? Or is he going to just kind of move on and not do this ever again? For those that have seen the original Frankenstein, you know how that one ends. This is a Mel Brooks movie, so how is this one going to end? We don't spoil things here, but needless to say, there is a musical number. There's a blind man who we'll get into shortly.
Oh, God, yes.
There is the sequence with the little girl, just very similar to Frankenstein. So it really follows that whole structure of Frankenstein, but this is a Mel Brooks movie, so things don't end very similarly to the original Frankenstein.
It's got his touch to it, that's for sure. And
it absolutely does.
Yes, the nod back to the original Frankenstein, where, as we discussed last year, where he yeets this little girl into a lake.
Yes.
There's a comedic twist to it that's just so good in Mel Brooks' version.
Definitely. There was a moment of disagreement between Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks during the production of this movie, and they never had a fight. They never really were in disagreements about anything. They were that good of friends, and they trusted each other so much that this was very unheard of. So at one point, Mel Brooks ended up storming out of Gene Wilder's hotel room.
Whoa!
Yeah, because of this heated argument. And within about an hour, Gene Wilder got a phone call from Mel Brooks saying, "Who the hell was that madman in your hotel? Don't you know not to let weird fuckers into your hotel room?" And then after that, everything was just water under the bridge.
Aww.
So I thought that was actually pretty awesome.
So cute.
Yes. Oh, there is another moment in this movie that is actually very famous, very, very famous, because Marty Feldman says something to Terry Garr and Gene Wilder in this movie as they're about to enter the castle. He says, "Walk this way," and then they all walk this way, which is, the way that Marty Feldman's walking with the hump and everything. This ended up being a very, very popular song with one of the greatest rock and roll bands ever on the planet. Aerosmith loved this movie so much that they wrote the song "Walk This Way" based off of that moment in this movie.
No
and the crazy,
way.
Yep, absolutely. It's in the "Walk This Way" autobiography of Aerosmith, and it's all over the trivia and the book that I'm also holding, The Story and the Making of Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, which I received from my grandmother years ago as a Christmas gift. I've read the book twice. It is fucking amazing. There are fantastic stories and pictures and clips from the script. There's a call sheet in there, photos. It's really just a treasure trove of the behind-the-scenes making of one of the greatest comedies of the 70s and of all time. So if you guys are very curious about reading this instead of watching a documentary, pick this book up. It belongs in your collection.
That's awesome.
Yes. And I actually love this movie so much that I've always wanted to see it in theaters. And I never really had the chance to until just a few years ago when the Vista in Hollywood, California was doing a midnight screening of Young Frankenstein with a Q&A with producer Michael Gruskoff. And a good buddy of mine, Daniel Poor, is his assistant. So I took my wife, we went and saw it. Amy laughed out of politeness because when we got in the car, she said she did not like the movie, but I just chewed Michael Gruskoff's ear off about the production. The movie ended at 1:30 in the morning. We were in that theater until 2:30 in the morning.
Oh my God.
The guy was awesome. He let me ask him any question that I had about the production of this movie, about Mel Brooks. And every now and then, Daniel on his Instagram will have a picture of him and Mel Brooks and Michael Gruskoff having lunch. And I one day would love to be there with them. But I'm very happy for Daniel because Daniel is an old Hollywood soul and he loves the old-timey Hollywood stuff, and the fact that he is where he is today is badass. And I've worked with him as a director, as his first AD. A really good dude. He's got a very good eye for storytelling, and it's great that somebody that I know is actually involved with comedic genius like this.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I've heard nothing but good things from you about Daniel.
Yeah, no, he's a great dude. Hopefully we'll have him on this podcast sometime.
Yes.
There is a scene in this movie that when I introduced Vee to this movie, actually, very recently, I wanted to know if Vee knew who this was in this movie. For those that have seen the movie, probably know who I'm talking about. This movie came out in 1974, like we said. Another movie that we've discussed on this podcast just a few years earlier came out with this actor from 1971, directed by William Friedkin, starring Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman was friends with Gene Wilder. They played tennis together. Gene was telling Gene about the process of writing this movie. Gene Hackman, being in The French Connection and serious movies, asked him if there was a role in the movie for him. And Gene Wilder brought that to Mel Brooks. They both talked about it. The only role they could think of giving Gene Hackman was the blind man. So they gave it to him, and what amazing, fantastic comedy is that 5 minutes of this movie. So fucking hysterical.
I'm so glad you brought this up. Yes, you introduced me to this movie only this year.
Yeah, within the last 4 months.
Because I'd never seen it before, and you're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And we had one of the weekends that we had together, it was a comedy weekend. We just decided to go for broke and just watch comedies, and that was the theme. And so we watched this movie, and of course I'm laughing hysterically. And it was only about halfway through this scene that I turned to you and I go, is that Gene Hackman?
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. And there is a line at the end of this scene that Gene Hackman throws out when the Frankenstein monster departs from his house after getting hot soup poured all over his crotch and his thumb lit on fire while he's trying to light a cigar. Gene Hackman says to him, "Where are you going?" "I was going to make espresso." That was improvised by Gene Hackman. They had to fade out as quickly as possible because they could not do another take. They faded out as quickly as possible because the entire crew lost it, and they just had to cut it as fast as they could because it was absolute gold. And that line is referenced in I don't know how many movies to this day.
Yes.
It is also referenced in one of my favorite cartoons on Nickelodeon from the 90s called Rocko's Modern Life. Filbert says it in a sequence where Rocko and Heifer are acting out a Hansel and Gretel story, and Filbert is the witch, and they both bolt from Filbert's house, and he comes out with a cup of espresso and says, "Hey, I was going to make espresso." So again, this movie went into production after Blazing Saddles hit the theaters, right? So Blazing Saddles was on its rise to being what it was then and what it is today. And Mel Brooks was so proud of that on his first day and several days of shooting Young Frankenstein, he wore his Blazing Saddles shirt because he had to show the crew that he was a badass. And I would do the same damn thing. If I would totally have a shirt made of my movie that is killing it in the box office and be like, "See, fuckers, you see this? Yeah, we're doing another one, and it's going to be, if not better, it's very similar." I think the best and sweetest part of the production of this movie was the fact that everybody has said that there was nothing but fun and laughter and love on this set. There was never an argument except for that one time with Gene and Mel. Everybody had so much fun that Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder decided right before they were going to finish shooting to add more scenes because they did not want to finish making this movie.
Aww.
So there was a moment where they did finish the movie, wrapped everything, crew is breaking down, Gene Wilder sits down in Dr. Frederick Frankenstein's laboratory, and he's feeling a little sad. He's got some tears in his eyes, and Mel's like, "What's the matter, Gene? This was an absolutely dream come true." And he says, "My dream is about to end because I don't want to go home. I want to continue making this movie for the rest of my life." And that just brings chills to my fucking... Oh, it's just amazing. Amazing. Makes me love the movie even more. You know, the fact that they loved making this movie and bringing this to the world that they didn't want to leave, the world that they created, because it just was so much fun and everybody had a great time making it.
Please watch this movie, everyone who's listening.
Oh yeah, if you haven't, you have to. It is currently streaming on HBO Max right now. I watched my signed by Cloris Leachman DVD copy, and I will never not say that. And I will be sharing some of the photos of me and Cloris Leachman from when we worked together because those are very close to my heart, and I was very, very sad when she passed away.
I'm so happy you can share some of those stories this week on the podcast, though.
Oh, me too. the cool thing is we get into the highest grossing movies of the year that we are discussing. Oddly enough, this is, I think, the first time that V and I are discussing the same year.
Yes.
So that's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So the highest grossing movie of 1974 was Blazing Saddles at $119.6 million, which you rounded out to $120 million.
Nice, I won.
You did indeed. The second highest grossing film, Towering Inferno, never saw it.
Good movie.
The third highest grossing film, Trial of Billy Jack, never heard of that one.
I don't think I have either.
Yeah, not sure. Number 4, Young Frankenstein,
Yes.
coming in with $86.2 million on a $2.7 million budget. When Michael Gruskoff approached the studio, Columbia, about this movie, Mel Brooks was saying that he needed anywhere between $2.5 and $3 million to make this movie. Columbia said no, so they brought it to 20th Century Fox, and 20th Century Fox greenlit it for $2.7. And, $86.2 million, 2 Oscar nominations later, this movie is, in my opinion, I think I love it more than Blazing Saddles because of what it means to me. Like, I grew up watching this movie with my grandfather, even with my father. My mother's not a fan of this movie. My wife isn't necessarily a fan, but I am and have been, and just love the fact that I was able to see it on the big screen, especially at the Vista. Like, I'm not sure if you've ever been to the Vista.
Yeah.
So you have. Okay, cool. Great theater. Awesome little spot, pocket of Hollywood. And the fact that I got to be there with the producer and talk to him for an hour afterwards. And I brought my book. Like, I was just like, dude, look, I have the book. Like, what the fuck? Oh, congratulations, you have the book.
No,
but it was
I'm
really
sure
cool.
he appreciated the fandom.
Yeah, no, he totally did. And I was very grateful to have that conversation with him in that hour at least.
And funny enough, Blazing Saddles is my pick over the two, so it's actually
there you go.
Good pairing for us.
Yeah, awesome. So this movie, like I mentioned, was nominated for 2 Oscars. It was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein,
yes, of course.
which is pretty awesome. This is not a original screenplay. This is an adaptation.
Oh, I'm sure
And then the other one-
I'm sure she never would have thought that.
Oh, I can only imagine what she would think of this movie. She probably would have a great time. I mean, she was a twisted woman.
Oh yeah,
writing that book.
totally.
The other nomination kind of blew me away because I thought maybe, not necessarily Best Picture, but Gene Wilder I thought maybe would have gotten a nomination. Same with Mel Brooks as director. Even production design or cinematography. Best Sound was the other nomination for for Young Frankenstein, which, I guess at the time for a comedy to be in the Oscars was a milestone. So I got to give him credit for that.
Well, think of all the different sound effects they had to use in that castle, and
Absolutely.
then with the lightning, and
No,
all
that's
the
true.
big pounding, and all the
Very, very
crazy
true.
sound effects that the monster made. Now, this is actually a good time to talk about the Oscar nominations that my movie received that year.
Oh,
'cause
yeah.
they were both nominated in the same Oscars,
That's right. Oh, my gosh.
which is
That's so awesome.
oh, can you imagine Mel Brooks rolling up, being like, "Yep, 2 of my movies just crushing it, left, right, and center."
Hell yeah.
So they were actually nominated in different categories, which is even cooler.
Oh, that is cool.
First off, it was nominated for Best Original Song, the Blazing Saddles theme in the beginning,
Oh, nice.
which was written by John Morris, and the lyrics were by Mel Brooks.
Oh, very cool.
It also was nominated for Best Film Editing,
Oh, nice.
and a nomination that makes my heart swell with happiness. Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Madeline Kahn.
Very cool. Hell yeah. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, congrats to Mel Brooks for a killer year of 1974.
I'm so glad we were able to do this together. I think it's a great way to just highlight the man.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Big fan of both of these movies. And again, Blazing Saddles was reintroduced to me after however many years. So, and it's now in, my at least top 20 comedies of all time. It's just so damn funny.
Well, and that's so great because I introduced you, or quote unquote reintroduced you, even though you didn't remember it, to
Right.
Blazing Saddles, and you introduced me to Young Frankenstein.
Yes, it's so awesome how that worked out.
This is just an episode full of love this week.
Yes, love and comedy. So awesome. And V, I'm curious, I'm sure you already have, but would you watch Blazing Saddles with your grandma?
I don't know that I ever watched this movie as a kid.
Ah,
I can only ever remember it in my 20s. So I don't know if I'd watch this with probably one of my grandmas, the one who was a sheriff.
oh,
I
nice.
definitely have seen it with both of my parents. I've seen it with one of my sisters. It's a phenomenal film. I think like 17 years old and above should watch it, though, just because of
Sure.
the satire and the language. It is jarring to hear all of that, of course. And so, I think older teens and above should watch that movie.
Definitely. I agree with you on that one.
And John, would you watch Young Frankenstein with your grandma?
I think I did at least 5 times.
Awesome.
Like, over the course of her being alive, we watched this movie several times. Even if it was on and already 15, 20 minutes in, we kept it on and finished it.
And what age do you think would start watching this? I would guess like 14 or 15?
Well, I saw it when I was like 8, and I loved it. So I feel like I would show this to my nieces maybe in about 4 or 5 years when one of them is about 9 or 10 years old, and the other one's about 8, maybe.
Yeah, there's nothing bad in this movie or scandalous. The innuendos would totally go over kids' heads. Definitely. I was just thinking mid-teens only because then they'd get the jokes.
Yeah, mid-teens, I guess that's true.
But there's nothing stopping a 9-year-old from watching this movie because it's not like it's overly scary in any way.
And it is PG. I think there's 1 or 2 swear words in the movie.
Yeah.
And nothing that no child has heard before. So I'm sure it would be just fine for a younger audience into their, preteen, early teenage years.
Yeah, I agreed.
Sweet. Well, that is episode 76, everybody. Thank you guys very much for joining us for this Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder extravaganza of comedy and
genius.
Fantastic film. Genius, absolutely. Yes, so thank you, Mr. Brooks, for these movies and for your continued comedy. One thing I forgot to mention of yours that Mel Brooks's that I love is the 1,000-year-old man bit that he does, that he did years and years ago. And big fan of Mr. Mel Brooks.
Yes, I remember my mother talking about that.
My dad was a big fan of that one too.
My parents were huge fans of that one, yeah.
Good stuff. All
right, it's that time of year again, the time that John has been anxiously awaiting.
Yeah.
The month that I've been anxiously avoiding. It is the month of October.
Yes, it is.
And therefore our month of horror.
Here we go. Vee, why don't you tell everybody what we're starting the month of October off with?
We're starting it off with classic slasher.
Yes.
My favorite slasher franchise and one of my favorite horror franchises as well, if not my favorite, because I don't watch horror and only have a couple to choose from.
Favorite horror franchise. All right.
Yes, I do. It's very cliche. It's very classic. I don't care. I love it. I still rewatch them because not only are they fun and entertaining, but also slashery goodness. I'm also completely in love with the lead because this is Scream, everybody.
Nice. I have not seen Scream in a few years, so I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. I watch the whole entire series once every, I would say, 2 to 3 years.
Oh, wow. I have not seen the last 2 or 3 installments either. So I'm looking forward to starting from the beginning.
Cool. Okay, let's do this.
Yes.
And John, what classic slasher did you pick?
I picked another classic slasher indeed, written and directed by the man that directed your pick.
That's right.
This is Wes Craven in the film that brought us Johnny Depp. This is Robert Englund and Johnny Depp and Heather Langenkamp in 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I'm actually looking forward to it, so no worries.
Perfect.
Yeah.
For the first time, you're looking forward to a horror movie. For those that are new, please do rate, review, subscribe, follow us on all social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We love to hear from our fans from across the globe, so thank you guys for continuing to listen. And I just wanted to read this review because it was very sweet. It is coming to us from Roach Like the Bug, giving us a 5-star review, so thank you, Roach Like the Bug. They say, Vee and John bring unique perspectives to their film reviews. From old classics to new cinema, they give you honest, open, well-thought-out reviews. They also include their background in film. Really riveting listen. So thank you very much, Roach Like the Bug. You have a sticker headed your way. And please do continue to listen.
Thank you, Roach, so much. That is so sweet of you to say that it's very thoughtful what we do. We do work really hard on researching our movies, and we're so glad to hear that it transfers into your speakers.
Indeed, indeed. Well, that does it for us here at Movies You Miss Podcast. And as always here at Movies You Miss Podcast, we like to sign off with film is a form of art. And in art, all opinions are valid, except if you think
it is ever, under any circumstance whatsoever, okay to have your phone out in the fucking movie theater.
Thank you. Indeed. Agreed. 100%.
All right, everyone. Thanks again so much. That is our show. Until next time, bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.